All right, as people are coming in, let us begin. Welcome to our today's EOS Learning Jam, everyone. Welcome to the EOS family from around the world. Good morning to North America. Good afternoon to Europe. Good evening to Asia Pacific. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm thrilled to have a very special guest today here with us, Dan Makoski, currently Chief Design Officer at one of the oldest and the biggest banks in the world, the Lloyds Banking Group in the UK. Um, Dan will be speaking today with us about the value of design. He will share with us some of his experiences, his current thinking on how design can help us grow and thrive in any industry and organizations in our work, in our project and teamwork. And he'll be, and what I find fascinating, Dan has fascinating amount of experience. He's been working on, the first Surface device that Microsoft, brought out. I don't know when was that. I think almost 10 years ago, right? So he's been working with Microsoft on some really disruptive and interesting projects. He's been working on Project Ara, a very disruptive and innovative project at Google. He's held leading design roles and positions at Walmart, Motorola, and Capital One. I mean, the list just goes on. And if I kept talking about his experience, would be here for the next 10 minutes still. Also, Dan, you're a TEDx speaker. So without further ado, we are stoked and excited to have you here at EOS. And as usual, friends, we'll have a Q&A session at 1:40. And so there'll be plenty of time to ask any questions directly to Dan. And without further ado, Dan, take us away.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Payam. And hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to see your shining faces across all the places that you're in. And EOS is such an interesting company at an interesting time. And we were just talking earlier about this whole term additive manufacturing. I don't think really does justice to the cultural change that companies like EOS can foster. And as a designer, often the stereotype of the designer is a black turtleneck wearing, narcissistic, self-centered artiste who is just trying to, create something that they think is awesome. But actually, design is about serving people. It's about solving problems for people. And the whole way that the world of business thinks about people as consumers is so strange. Like, we use that word all the time. And actually, people aren't consumers. They are creators. And the whole world of manufacturing has to adapt to that creativity. So today, I'm actually just going to share 4 stories across hardware and software and services where I've tried as a designer to go beyond kind of that stereotypical dictatorial design vision and actually have a little bit more co-creation and participation with the people we sometimes call consumers. Because to me, that's what real design is all about. And that's perfect for a company, I think, like EOS. So I'm going to just share my screen here. And we did a little test before and it worked a little bit, sometimes didn't. So just come off mute and let me know if things aren't quite working, and then I'll just kind of reconnect. But let me just start broadcast. All right, there we go. Here we go. Okay, you see a goofy picture of me with glasses?
Yep.
All right, very good. Okay, so I'm Dan. I am a designer, and I started out actually in the web, but I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. And the first story I'm going to share with you, when I was heading design research at Motorola, and Motorola had just gotten acquired by Google, and we were working on this phone here, the Moto X, which was this kind of flagship collaboration between Google Android software and Motorola, legacy of hardware engineering. And I want to tell you about one particular feature of this phone called touchless control, but I want to show you how we got there. And so it actually started out with some of our co-creation research. We went into people's homes. And if you see on the chair on the left there, we had these various foam core boards covered in this kind of whiteboard material of all sizes. So something that could be the size of a phone or a tablet or a watch, or even the TV here on the right. And we did a deep amount of work with a number of households, and first doing ethnographic research, photo diaries, getting to know them. And then this final step of the process was we had them act out what life would be like 5 years in the future if technology could do anything. And this is Linda. She's in San Francisco, and she was prototyping her television. And she said, I come home every day from work, and I get home about half an hour before my husband does. And I do the same thing. I try to find the remote. I don't know exactly where it was from the night before or whenever. And I turn it on because I just like the sounds of just social noise behind me, right? So I turn it on. She said, you know what? I would love what if I could just walk in, and what if my TV just recognizes me? And she says, hey, welcome home. You want to turn on the news like you always do? And if I wanted to change the channel, or, so she was talking to screens. Now, this is long before anyone saw voice patterns as a common interaction for any device. The only place that actually we had seen this happen is in like Star Trek and sci-fi. And we saw this pattern across all of our households. This was a gentleman who was creating this fridge tablet where he's kind of keeping track of things that he wanted to get and actually talking to it. He's like, well, I want to write, but I also want to talk. And we saw it also with wearables, this notion of using voice. And it was interesting because the design team at first just thought that this was people were doing this because they didn't have the skills to sketch as designers kind of an appropriate UI. But when we showed this pattern to our engineers, they said, well, we actually had this X8 chip that we didn't know what to use. It was like a really low power listening chip that we thought we'd use it for notifications. And they said, well, what if we used it to listen for a trigger word? Like you could just talk to your phone. And we ended up launching the Moto X, which in addition to being able to design yourself, and you can imagine some additive manufacturing, possibilities here, that you could just talk to it. And it was the first time this pattern was made real outside of science fiction. And of course, this is now a very common pattern, right? We're speaking to devices all the time and screens. And I just wanted to share this story because that very first implementation of creating this dialogue, a literal dialogue between hardware, software, and people, it actually came from involving them in the process. And so that kind of leads me a bit to, design can go beyond just making things look good or just making things look stylish. They can go to the heart of how people interact with a product or a service or a company. So when I went to Google, I was working with their advanced hardware innovation group, and I had the opportunity to work on whatever project I wanted for a couple of years. And I said, well, can we do this in hardware? Right? EOS has probably been thinking a lot about this space, right? What does additive manufacturing unlock in the world of traditional mass manufacturing products? And I wanted to create as much flexibility in hardware as we had in software. And so we took some of our early Motorola phones, slapped some microcontrollers onto the back so we could open up software hacking. And then we made our first hardware development toolkit, which was this device. It was basically a Sprinter van covered in 4,000 linear feet of Velcro, because Velcro is awesome and you can stick anything to it and change it. And you can see there we've got a bunch of 3D printers, no EOS devices. We got some 3D systems machines, from back in the day, laser cutters. We've got, and then a crew of hardware and software designers and engineers. And what we did is, as a way of learning, we drove 14,002 miles across the US over 6 months. And we went to colleges, universities, and maker spaces. And we would host these 48-hour hackathons or makeathons, where teams would start by thinking about what they wanted to create in the world, teaming up, and then in essentially a day and a half, building prototypes of their ideas of hardware. And all the while, we were trying to learn, well, what interfaces are they using? What components are they using? How much are they using 3D printers? How much, what kind of capabilities would you need in a malleable smartphone, process? So here at Caltech, this was one of our very first teams. They created a glove that translated American Sign Language into text messages, which it wasn't fast, it wasn't error corrected, but it worked. And we saw, this other team at MIT actually created this bike helmet that just simply used accelerometers to create, brake lights, to communicate to bikers and cars around you, when you were slowing down and when you would turn. This team actually ended up raising almost $1 million on Kickstarter to actually make it a reality. And they're actually now in their third generation of helmet. You can buy them in the Apple Store, or it's interesting. I've seen a lot of competitors actually come up in this space. And so, across these 6 months, we just saw team after team creating these incredible ideas that the hardware and software designers at Google, didn't have on our roadmap. So we knew we had to create a platform that would enable anyone to create. So that was the motivation behind this modular smartphone, Project Ara. It was if, Lego and a smartphone had a love child, right? You can swap out any piece, any component. And while Project Ara ended up not making it over the finish line, because the executive sponsor of this project ended up going to Facebook, and the hardware team at Google had other priorities, Motorola did end up shipping the Moto Z, which allowed for folks to not have many modules, but at least one module that could transform their smartphone into a projector or a speaker or a camera and be really adaptive. And it's one of the, their highest rated phones kind of at the time. So again, another kind of example of how design can help you think about unlocking capacity in a new way. So I got 2 more stories here. I'm gonna switch from hardware to software, because after having Project Ara not make it, I was a little depressed. I was wandering the streets of Palo Alto in a bit of sadness. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna go to a company that doesn't really have any vision, that is really just shipping week to week, month to month. And Walmart actually came onto my radar. And Walmart is the world's largest company. They're the Fortune 1. And of course, in retail, they're doing amazing things, but in online shopping, they're getting their butts kicked by Amazon, right? So they had this existential fear of irrelevance if they didn't really embrace digital channels. And so I came on board, joined the Silicon Valley team, headed up global design, had a team in Bentonville, Arkansas as well. And when I joined, this was the state of Walmart.com. So if you're like me, I was just like, wait, is this Hello Tech? Oh no, they're just selling the most valuable part of their real estate to, as an ad. And then there's 18 to 20 navigation points in the first 96 pixels. And there's this point of view ad, which I don't know what's happening about Memorial Day and allergy medicine, but definitely didn't resonate with me. And then it's just carousel after carousel of indecision. So from a design perspective, not a lot of soul. And I remember when I was joining Walmart, I was learning about the history of Walmart. And I didn't think Walmart had a design bone in its body, right? It was a manufacturing, supply chain, retail powerhouse, but not really a place that you think of design. But when I learned about how the company was named, this is the very first Walmart store that Sam Walton created. And originally, Sam wanted to call Walmart, it was a 4-word name. It was Walton Supermart Discount City. And there's this famous story where he turns to his store associate, Bob Bogle, who did all the logistics. He did everything from the fixtures, the lighting, the signage. And he said, Bob, what do you think? Walton Supermart Discount City. And, Bob just kind of shook his head and said, Sam, there's just not a lot of space up there for all the letters. And each one cost $7. And so he circled the wall of Walton and the Mart of Supermart and said, I could do this whole sign for $49 if we just call it Walmart. And this is the first sign, which from a typographic perspective are these beautiful sans serif Scrabble letters. And I was like, here is design in action. Remove everything that's unnecessary, be really practical, and focus on what matters. So we kind of took this idea of restraint and simplicity, and we created a design language that we called living design, because Walmart's purpose is to help people save money so they can live better. So we focused on the living better part. We actually commissioned a typeface called Bogle, named after, in the honor of that store associate that had those kind of attributes, and a whole design language that created this kind of new body. But we needed a soul for this site, not just minimalism and restraint. So to get there, we actually hosted pizza parties in our design studios over several months. We brought in families that relied on Walmart, and we asked them to create a collage of what living better means to them. And it was just awesome to have parents and kids and roommates talk about life and what they want to do in life. And we had them circle the parts of their collage that held them back from living that dream. And we then looked at all of these collages, and then we had design sprints about how can we bring the life goals of the Jones into reality? How can we transform the content? How can we personalize this experience? So lots of process I'll skip through, but essentially we ended up with the mobile first and kind of a desktop second redesign of Walmart.com and all of our digital interactions in all of our branches, all of our stores, 5,200 retail across the US. And it had, less than, it had about 40% of the density of the previous website, but all of the things that remained were personalized to you. And we curated these beautiful stories about activities and experiences, not just how do you find objects and categories. It doubled conversion. It led to extraordinary business results. It led to the biggest stock jump in Walmart's history through this kind of approach that wasn't a copycat of Amazon. And so that was, my last 10 years of Silicon Valley were projects like those. And so you can imagine going from those design kind of led projects to now, 3 years ago, I now have to say that in addition to being a designer, I am a banker. And I do it with a bit of hesitation because no self-respecting designer, I think, ever, graduates from design school saying, yeah, let me be a banker someday, because there's a lot of design and innovation happening in banking. And actually, they're not wrong. If you do this Google search for finances are, look at these top results. These are such a clear indication of how disconnected people are from money. When finances are ruining my marriage and stressing me out and out of control, there's a fundamental disconnect from a design and a human perspective. So I came to Lloyd's. They knew a lot about technology and business. This is the Stanford kind of D school model of innovation factors. The idea here is you want to be in the center. This is stuff I'm sure you all know about very well. But there's lots of conversations at businesses around what technology can do from a feasibility perspective and what business models work from a viability perspective. But do we really have enough conversations about what humans need from a desirability perspective? So this is the question that I was, tasked with answering. So as chief design officer, we pulled together, a bunch of separate teams that were scattered and tucked away in the deep pockets of the organization. And we pulled them into this new human-centered design team. We created these guilds of design, and 9 of them. I won't go into great depth here, but all of the various aspects of language, conversation design, to journeys within service design, to how we study humans from a design research perspective, to how do we have an engineering approach with design prototyping. Pulled them into this one unified design team. And here's what they look like, just kind of ordinary, diverse, awesome bunch of folks all across the UK. And the team articulated their purpose. And the purpose of Lloyd's is to help Britain prosper. And so the team had a brilliant stroke of genius of creating these 3 words, that we design for prosperity, which puts design at the heart of the business purpose. And so when you think about at EOS, what your purpose is, how can design unlock that in new ways? I think would be, maybe a good question for conversation in a few minutes here. But we realize that the word prosperity, though, is kind of awkward. Like no one uses that, in ordinary language. So we built these design research labs all across the UK to go deeper into prosperity, which we started saying was, well, maybe it's helping people end the day a bit better than it started when it comes to their finances, to make this conceptual design idea, a bit more practical and tangible. But when we did design research, we did Lego, creative play, we did a little paper prototyping and co-creation, we started to realize that the way that people think about prosperity is nothing to do with money. It's not about accounts. It's not about amounts. It's actually about, and this was actually one of our kind of life modeling activities we did, where we used Play-Doh and Lego. It's actually about relationships and experiences in life, moments in life. And money is just an enabler. Money is just an abstract concept of trust and value that enables this other thing called life. And so we started using our design skills. We actually have a 23-person storytelling team of animators and documentary film producers and screenwriters. And we use those skills to start to tell a story about what would banking feel like if it was more human and more related to relationships and life moments, and less related to, accounts and tech features. And when we were telling this story, we realized we didn't have any good way to talk about financial progress and health. Like the animation team used this metaphor of an aquarium, where you could teach healthy money habits in school, or in a future branch, you could sit down with, grandma and a granddaughter, where the grandma's talking about, well, here's how to use money, and she's teaching her granddaughter. And so aquarium was our well, maybe that's a metaphor. And I'll wrap up this last story here. We'll get into the heart of this last story by talking about this pivotal moment when this is the Bank of Scotland's headquarters, the Mounds up in Edinburgh. And there's an archivist who took us down into the bowels of the archives to look at all these founding documents from the Bank of Scotland. And we just saw rows and rows of these books and realized that this is called the ledger. And the ledger actually was a metaphor borrowed by banking from the church in the 1400s. And it was the first really structured, data sorted, time-oriented way of bringing trust into the financial system. And we just realized as designers that even with all the technology that we have today, we've just been digitizing the ledger, which is this rearwards transactional view of finances, and is not helping people connect to money in ways that are about relationships and more human. So we said, well, how do we figure out what the new metaphor is going to be? And and if you're not convinced about the power of a metaphor, I mean, just remember in 1974, this napkin sketch at Xerox PARC, led by an anthropologist, Tim Mott, changed everything in the world of computing, right? I mean, the metaphors that we were using to work with machines were punch cards and then command line interfaces. And it was only when Tim Mott worked with non-technical folks and this office schematic napkin sketch kind of came at us on his research. And then, Steve Jobs and Wozniak stole this or borrowed this interface when they created the Mac, and all of a sudden technology gets democratized. This is the power of metaphor. Design works, particularly in technology, through these. And I know EOS is clearly into this space, right? With additive manufacturing. How do you equip engineers and designers to harness the possibilities of what you could create in a space where anything's possible? So we decided to do what Tim Mott did, which is ask people who aren't particularly financially literate. So this is our design team in one of our branches, Cannon Street, Halifax branch in London. And we turned the branch into a bit of a design thinking studio. And if you see that question on the right, my finances are like, we started asking people this question, and check out some of these responses. Like, these are so interesting. Like, you see, like the Google search, some of the kind of negative connotations, like, climbing a hill. Like, I feel like my finances are just this ongoing obstacle course. Or I love an open prison. I feel completely trapped by my finances, but the prison is actually open if I just could freaking figure out how to navigate to free myself. Or an endless to-do list, right? Right there is the ledger in its negative kind of format. So then we ask a more important question, which is, what do you wish your finances were like? And we use sketching, we use Lego creative play. And so this woman, she actually ended up doing this sketch. She said, well, here's where I'm at the bottom. So this is me and this is my husband. And we want to get to the top. Happiness, we want to, save up for a home that we can get, down payment on the home, and 100,000 saved for retirement someday. And what are my options to get there? Like, connect the dots between where I'm at and where I want to go. And we started realizing that the problem with the ledger is it's all rearwards looking. There's no metaphors to help with the future. What we really need is a journey. Like, let's map out the possibilities of the future. And so some of us on this call are probably at an age where when we learned to drive, this is the way we had to navigate. Anyone remember this? Where, if you get lost, you pull out the Rand McNally Atlas from the back and you have to like read the grid system and like the difference between interstates, and like it was a mess. It took a while. And I feel like this is kind of where we're at with our financial planning today. Like, you have to just figure it out. And so we started actually creating our very first prototype of a new interface based on the journey. So this was simply a timeline. You can put on people, you can put on events. This is the actual first prototype. Super messy, super lo-fi. And we were working with customers in one of our branches. And one of our customers, after the second session, they said, hey, can I take this home? And we said, sure. Yeah, this is your financial plan. And they said, because I want to put it on my fridge to help remind us about where we're trying to go. And we said, that's cool, but this is really static. We need to go to this notion of a journey where we can actually get to more kind of precise, personalized, turn-by-turn directions. So I don't know, did anyone remember this moment when MapQuest and AAA and Triptych and you would plug in where you're at and where you want to go, and you would get this turn-by-turn directions, right? This is kind of where we want to get to with financial services. How do we get to a place where we give that personalized guidance of where you want to head? And this is great. And we started going into software, and this is a time lapse sped up view, and so a little cranky here, but you could drop in life events and relationships on this timeline, and we started to spit out algorithm driven recommendations about, well, if you want to do those goals, here are the things you need to do. And it was very, very kind of turn by turn direction oriented. But the problem with things like this is they're not dynamic and adaptive. So for many of you, we're seeing this era of navigating a journey, which is, I don't even need to know what the path is necessarily. I mean, you can take over, you can navigate yourself, but you have auto rerouting algorithms and satellite positioning, and now the beginnings of autonomous, driving. And I think this is where we're trying to get to in the world of banking with this new metaphor. So the final example here is we're doing some co-creation on our main servicing application, right? So this is where, your mobile app, where you check out your banking bits. And, Dominic here in the middle, didn't want to know his balance. What he wanted to know, he created this home screen where he says, actually right in the middle, I want to know that there's 9 days until payday, and I've got 92 pounds left until payday. Like, that's a much more relevant bit of data to me than, my bank balance at the top. And we've actually started to, I can't show you all of our about to ship interfaces here, but here are a couple of glimmers of this automatic goal creation based on your transactions, your income, the physics of your kind of finances. And if you're not good at setting goals, we help you do it with easy ways to adjust. Or if you're about to go into overdraft in a week or so, we say, well, hey, heads up, you got some bills coming up next week, right? Just to help folks kind of manage their finances. And this is the beginnings of those auto rerouting nudges and algorithms to help people connect with banking in a little bit more of a human way. So we're just at the beginning of this journey. It requires us to go beyond just the engineering, business only, left brains capabilities of viability and feasibility and then get into the right brain side of intuition and creativity and humanity. And This is actually our CTO. When I joined, he said, Dan, I want to take a selfie. And I said, sure, but we got to switch classes. And so we traded frames. And to me, this is a metaphor of how we need to see through the eyes of others. As designers, we need to see through the eyes of the people that we call customers or clients and understand their needs and involve them in the creative process. And across design and engineering and business and product, we need to be able to understand each other's languages so that we can innovate. And I'm just going to leave you with one little thought before we open it up to kind of questions and discussion, which is the only way to get into a space where we're starting to go deeper into creativity is to get out of our comfort zones. And there's a great book about this called Creative Confidence, written by the Kelly brothers at IDEO. If you haven't read it, check it out. It's a great manual at how to tap into our innate human creativity. And if you don't have time to read it, I'll just say that the signature thing you can do is get out of your comfort zone. Not so far that you feel helplessly alone and disconnected, but far enough that it makes you think in new ways. And the way that I did it right before COVID, and I've actually continued with some virtual classes, is I actually go to hip hop dance class a couple times a week. This is, Pineapple Studios in Covent Garden, where, someone like me normally doesn't show up. And I felt horribly out of place for the first couple of months when I did it. I was like, I just got to embrace it until I stopped caring what people thought about me and just got into the vibe. So whatever it is for you, maybe it's hip hop dance, maybe it's something else, I encourage you to get out of your comfort zone, bring out your inner designer, because amazing things will happen. All right, I'll stop sharing and let's have some chat.
Am I unmuted? Yes. Thank you very much. Friends, let's make use of the extra time. First of all, thank you, Dan, again. It's been wonderful, full of insights, and just, my eyes were shining, and I was just taking notes as well. So, yes, let's open up the space. If you have questions, friends, please feel free to unmute your mic or write in the chat, and we'll make sure that your question is read out.
So great question. Dan, design is also a dilemma. Oh, here, let me go back in the chat here. Isn't design also a dilemma? What do you think about Ford's quote? If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Yeah, so this is a really interesting point, isn't it? Well, first of all, you should read the story about the context around that quote, because the way that we interpret that is that people are stupid, they're idiots, they don't know what they want, right? Like, don't ask people because they have no idea. They can only think from the context that they're in. And I don't know about you, but I don't think about people in that way. I don't think people are idiots and stupid. I think people actually have hopes, they have dreams, and you just have to ask them the right question to get there. And often design research is thought of as a way of trying to make decisions that a business or a designer or an engineer really has to make. Like, hey, should we make it blue or red? Right? Like, well, actually, maybe we have a brand's philosophy around what colors mean, and we just need to make a decision on that one. But asking someone a question like, how do you want to feel when you just paid off a loan? This is a moment of celebration, right? Like, people can easily articulate their hopes and their dreams. So I think if we had equipped Henry Ford's design researchers, if those really existed, they probably didn't. I think design research really came about in the 70s and 60s as like psychologists and anthropologists started working in design firms. But if they had them and equipped Ford with some co-creation tools for people to imagine the future of transportation, you would have seen not only cars, but you would have seen, spaceships and teleportation and probably a lot of other things that would make us erase the time and space, limitations. So I think a lot of it is in how you ask and how you involve people. And let's get out of the myth of the genius that we are the experts and we know best. And those poor consumers or those clients, they don't really know what the hell they need. We'll determine what they need. I think that's a big barrier to us doing innovative work.